I manage an Airbnb and a guest has overstayed by a month now without paying or responding. She only paid for the original booking period. I have heard that RDC complaints take time. What immediate steps can I take to resolve this? Well, first of all, the RDC, which is the Rental Dispute Center in Dubai, which is the specialized court that deals with rental disputes and including jointly owned property disputes and also Airbnb type of cases or holiday homes cases. It's actually a fairly efficient and effective judicial forum, and it is not true that they take time. Sometimes we have a few RDC cases that they can be resolved within just a matter of a few weeks. I mean, we're talking about 2 weeks from start to finish. So. And the whole idea of the specific court is it's specialized on rental disputes, and rental disputes usually are fairly simple, and the type of questions are kind of repetitive. So the judges are able to schedule hearings quickly and process documents fairly quickly as well. So therefore, since your tenant has already overstayed by at least by a month, had you filed the case to RDC right after she failed to make her next payment, you would have already had a judgment. So that's basically number one. Number two, what you should do. To kind of to cover yourself on all bases, it's always better to file an RDC case because one that gives you a legal platform, sort of legal forum through which to claim all the rights, including the unpaid rent. But also it secures you from sort of potential liability that you might face by entering the property knowing that somebody else lives in it, right? So there could be a claim, for example, for breach of privacy if you just enter the property. So through RDC, you can ask for unpaid rent. You can ask for an eviction. You can also ask for compensation for whatever period that you have suffered as a result of her breach. You can also ask for payment until she moves out and any other sort of potential damages. And also, if you have a judgment, even if that person, the tenant, does not pay you now or is not in the country, you will have an enforceable judgment. So sooner or later, whenever the person comes back into town, you will be able to enforce it against her or him. So that's kind of the benefit of having an RDC judgment. Obviously, the flip side of it is that it is a process. It's still a court case, and if we're talking about Airbnb, so presumably your guest may not be a full-time resident of the UAE, so it may be that you are worried that whether it even makes sense for you to pursue this formal route, because how would you enforce it against somebody who's not a UAE resident? But as I mentioned earlier, if you have an enforceable case, even if that person is not in the country now, whenever they re-enter next time, you will be able to use this final judgment to enforce against them in the future. So it's still something to have something in hand is much better than having nothing. So that's kind of the recommended path forward. But in the sort of interim, what you can do is there's always an option, depending on the circumstances, but there's always an option for you, for example, to change keys or to deactivate access cards. And certainly those options would be a lot more comfortable to execute or enforce if there were also documented underlying agreement. So I guess the moral of the story, and that's kind of the third option, is that moving forward, or perhaps you should re-examine your underlying agreements, because there may be a provision in the agreement that actually allows for you to either change locks on the property or to deactivate access cards, which ultimately kind of forcefully get the tenant evicted. So yeah, in that case, you may not recover your unpaid rent, but at least you've sort of gotten rid of this tenant, the defaulting tenant, and then you can utilize the property in the future. But I guess the moral of the story is make sure to review your underlying agreements and make very clear provisions for yourself and for your tenants, what their obligations are in terms of how soon they must pay and what the grace period is or may not be, and the penalties associated with the delay, and more importantly, the remedies that you have as the manager of the property to be able to take over the property without potentially having to go to court, such as changing locks and and deactivating access cards. So these are more practical solutions, but in order for them to make more sense in the future, you also need, or you would benefit from having a legal framework on which you can rely with regards to at least your tenants whenever something like this happens, and they will be surprised why it is that they're not able to re-enter the property. You can show them the contract. So look, here's a provision in the contract that says if you don't pay by such and such date, and after X number of days of grace period, I have the right to change the locks and deny you re-entry. So it's a lot more difficult for the tenant than to argue otherwise, and certainly to call the police, because you'll have an agreement to show that this is this is a commercial dispute, and and usually in these kinds of cases, if the tenant were to call the police because they're being locked out of the properties, and this is these examples come from real time, the police usually looks at it like, well, if it's a commercial agreement, if it's a commercial deal, it's a rental, go to RDC. This is not police's domain.